On this episode, we're going to break down the Winning Wealth Real Estate Summit 2023 that we just held a few weeks ago. We're going to talk about some of the major things that we learned from each individual speaker that spoke on stage, as well as some learning lessons we took away from hosting the event ourselves. Tune in to hear all those things. All right, so today we are talking about the Winning Wealth Real Estate Summit 2023. So we threw this event about 2 weeks ago. We had over 100 people attending it. It was a 2-day real estate summit. But before we get into some of the learning lessons we had from that event, I wanted to kind of set the frame of what this event was and how it came to be. So we used to throw monthly networking events. We started those 3 years ago. And we would do these monthly networking events. They were free events that we had at the Smart Asset Realty office. And we would line up a speaker. We'd bring some pizza and drinks and get, 20, 30, 40 people show up sometimes. We did that for a long time, right? And I think we got to a point where it was a lot to keep up with, to do every single month, to get people to show up, to find speakers, to plan everything. So we shifted away from that, right? And we decided to start doing just 1 to 2 bigger events per year. We did one last year where we rented out the top floor of the building we live in, had 50 people show up. It was, again, a free event. We threw a really cool panel, and that one went really great. So after that one, we decided, how do we go even bigger and do a paid event this time, right? And get over 100 people to show up, make it a 2-day event. So that's kind of how we came across this process of deciding to throw this Winning Wealth event, and we did it, right? So it was 2 weeks ago, I think, about the time we're recording now. We probably started planning it 4 or 5 months ago. So there's a lot of planning. So we're going to talk about some of the learning lessons of just throwing an event and some of the takeaways we got from the event. But before we do that, wanted to go through exactly some of the learning lessons we had from each speaker. So I think we had a total of about 10 speakers. And let's start with that. So the first speaker we had, day one, was Scott Lurie. So this guy's a beast. I really enjoyed his presentation. He he does a ton of development deals. I think he's got over $500 million in property.
Yeah, that's a beast.
He has a hard market company. He's very, very sharp, and enjoyed his conversation that he got up and did a solo presentation. So one of the things that he kicked his presentation off with that I found really interesting was he said, "How hard are you willing to work for $1 million?" And that was kind of the premise of his whole presentation. And I thought that was super interesting. He kind of then talked about identifying what your risk profile is, because certain people are going to take more risk than others, right? You might be a less risk adverse person, or you might be a person that decides to take more risk, right? And that's going to really translate to what your real estate investing strategy is. If you're a more aggressive person, you might be targeting more aggressive deals, vacant properties, or heavy turnaround properties. Whereas if you're less risk adverse, right, then you would go and target a buy and hold duplex, right? Something that already has tenants in a very straightforward turnkey property. So those are some of the takeaways I had from his as a speaker. He really, the guy's a risk taker, right? I think he talks about, right now he's building over $500 million worth of properties. And he said something along the lines of most of them are vacant right now, right? And I don't have tenants lined up, but I'm going to figure it out, right? I'm willing to take the risk, and the investors alongside me know there's some risk in the deal. There's also a ton of upside. So that one really resonated with me from him as a speaker. Do you have anything on top of that, Jeff?
Yeah. I would say, well, first of all, understanding your own risk profile, I think, is crucial, right? And not everybody has to have the same, and certainly not everybody has the same risk profile, right? So it's finding out what you're comfortable with and then going all in, at that amount of risk, right? And you can, when you know yourself and know what you're comfortable with, you can really maximize your own results that way. I think that's what he was getting at, talking about his risk scale. Maybe we can show a picture of that slide, but I thought that was a really good slide that he had. The other thing that he talked about was networking. Always be networking. Scott's always out on the town.
Yeah.
You see him, and he's always meeting people. And I think, in any type of business that you're in, whether it's commercial real estate, tech, whatever, right? The more people that you know, the more that you can, work with and build your own personal brand and your company's brand. And you never know what can happen. And he told a story about somebody that he met, I think, at a brewery, and the guy was drunk, and had, gotten into an accident or something. And then years later got a settlement for 2.5, or I don't even know how much the settlement was for, but wrote Scott a
It
check
was 2.5 million.
for $2.5 million. And so you think about that, like that's someone, if Scott had never been out that day, had not been talking about his business, his company, what they do, he never would have met that person. And so, that's just another example of always, always, always be networking, always be, evangelizing your company, your brand, what you can do to help other people, how you can add value to other people. And at the end of that, he's got a lifelong friendship with this person now, it seems like, and was able to get $2.5 million worth of equity capital to go out, and that's going to be, and he's going to turn that $2.5 million into $7 million for this guy. I have no doubt. And then probably reinvest it and go turn it into 20 million. So, and then obviously that's just me guessing on projections and whatever. But even if he took the $2.5 million and turned it into 3 or 4 or 5, whatever, right? So I think that was the risk piece, the work ethic piece, and then the networking piece really resonated with me.
I agree. And the next speaker we had was Justin Spaulding. So another hitter in the real estate space. He does a lot of syndication deals. I mean, he's got over a couple thousand units. Been in the space for a while, and really an expert at turning these properties around, raising capital. So that one was an interview style. So Jeff did an interview on that one. A few of the takeaways I had before you can go into yours is he talked a lot about, and some of the questions you asked were just like business is like a sport. He talked about he was an athlete prior to getting into real estate, and just kind of talked about how the parallels between business and athletes and sports, right? I think at the end of the day, like to me, I think I've said this in previous videos, like business is the best sport there is, right? It's the most competitive sport there is, and you treat it like a sport. You go out and you're competing against people. There's always someone out there that's going to be better. It's going to be smarter, right? It's going to have more of an edge than you. So it's a big competition that you're always going and battling against other people, which I think is a fun way to look at it, right? I think a lot of us played sports when we were young, and you lose that competitive edge as you get older because you're no longer competing. But it's really fun to be able to play in this business sport, right? So
Unless
he also talked a lot about
golf, like the club champ of Ozaki right here on the other side of the call, B-Rock.
It's some of that sometimes, yep. Then he talked about like building systems in a team. So I know a lot of the content he posts, he talks about just like turning projects around quick, right? Like they'll buy a property and they'll go out and have a team that's implementing their value add project on day one, right? And I think that really resonated with me too for our company. Is there's always ways to add more systems and processes, right, to be efficient. And at the end of the day, speed is what makes money, right? If you can make decisions quick, if you can implement business plans quick, that's really going to enhance your ability to make money. So that resonated a lot with me as well. Those are some of the key takeaways I had from his. What about yours?
Yeah, I mean, everything that you said, and I've known Justin for, a long time. We played a little bit of football together, trained a bit together in an off season back in college. I've always thought super highly of his work ethic, just how he goes about his business and how he's a professional at what he does. One thing, so everything that you said is obviously I heard it there firsthand, but the thing that stuck out to me is how he takes responsibility for the follow-up no matter what, right? So like if you're in business, you're in real estate, you're in sales or whatever, right? He says he doesn't hand out business cards. He tries to get business cards from other people, and he puts the responsibility and the onus on himself to follow up with that person and work with them in whatever capacity possible. And I think that's a good point. A lot of people, they go to networking events, they bring a shit ton of business cards, they hand them out, and they just expect people to follow up with them. Or it's the same thing as whatever. If you're just advertising for your company or whatever, and you just post on social media, or you post in traditional advertising, and you just hope that the phone's going to start ringing. I think what Justin was talking about there really resonated with me, that it's on you to get to people to want to do business with you in whatever way possible, to close sales, to raise money, to buy deals, whatever. It's on you to follow up with them, to take the next step, to keep the momentum, to keep the ball rolling, to get that, that person into some sort of a funnel that you can work with them on, and try to help solve their needs, or at least qualify if it's a good fit for you guys to do business. But it's on him to take that initial step after meeting someone. I think that really resonated with me, and it's a great takeaway for any listeners, right? It's not enough to just hand out business cards, to just advertise, to post on social media. The onus is on you to follow up with people, and then figure out if there's a fit to work together in some capacity.
Follow up and close. Yep, for sure. The next one was a capital raising panel. So we had Bill Ham and Mike Morawski on a panel to talk about raising money for real estate, right? A lot of this event was around raising money and syndication. So the biggest overarching theme I got from that one is right now raising money is not easy. And I think you're seeing it across the board from other operators. We're seeing it, in our business, right? I mean, it's investor sentiment is definitely down right now, and investors are very holding on to their capital, right? And they're only investing opportunities that they're really confident in. So that was one kind of reassuring thing, I guess, seeing or hearing more is we're not the only ones that is seeing that right now. It's tough across the board to raise money. Some of the other things was they talked about strategies for raising money, right? And building a track record before you go out and raise capital is really going to make your raising experience much easier. And also starting with family and friends. They talked about the easiest place to starting raising money is from people that already know and trust you, right? Not going out and trying to generate a cold email list. Of course, those things come. But if you can start with people in your internal network to raise money from, that's the easiest part to start with, right? And we talked a lot about this, actually. I think it was our last podcast episode a few ago. We talked about raising money and probably some similar notes from there. And lastly, the thing is, and again, this just goes without saying, but being extra diligent when you're handling other people's money, right? It's one thing to invest your own money and make a mistake and lose some money, but when you're handling other people's money, being extra diligent, right? And of course, we all know that, but I think it was good to hear them again say it, right? And really reiterate the importance of taking that extra responsibility on when you're bringing other people's money in.
Yeah, we talked a little bit about systems to raise capital. We talked about that in our podcast, a month ago or whatever, and they touched on it a bit too. I think it's crucial to have systems. They were kind of talking about it more in a high level, how to approach things. And I thought that was very valuable. There's no doubt that businesses, we're in a tough cycle, a tough period, right? There's a lot of adversity in the business world across sectors, right? Real estate, other businesses as well. Like it's a challenging time, but I think if you focus on the high level outputs, the systems and processes needed to be successful, the messaging there is you can do well at raising capital. You can do well, in other forms of business, as long as you're focusing on, the blocking and tackling. If I want to bring it back to football, right, in sports, if you're doing the right things, the little things, and you're doing them consistently and often, you're going to be able to raise capital or close deals or whatever in even in tough times. And even though it's a hard time, right, as long as you can fight through it and do the right things time and time again consistently, you're going to be able to have some success. So I thought that was a very timely panel, and I thought it made a lot of sense.
Agreed. Next speaker we had was Bill Ham. So he spoke on the capital raising panel, and then he did an individual presentation after. And so he's an experienced syndicator. I mean, he's a huge coach in the syndication space as well. I don't even know how many deals he's syndicated, but I know he's been involved in a lot of properties. And he talked about this theory, the conveyor belt theory is what he talked about. And I think this is something that we're starting to see firsthand in our business, but also just really important to reiterate to people that are getting into this space now, right? There's a 5-year cycle a lot of times, right? It's not necessarily, especially in the syndication space, where you're coming into these deals and it's not a flip or a wholesale where you can come into one of these deals and 3 months later, you're going to get paid $20,000 and it's a really quick turnaround. These syndication deals are a longer term cycle where you could buy several properties in 1 year. And of course, you're going to get some cash flow, some fees, but really it's when you sell those properties, refinance those properties, and that's generally on a 5-year cycle. So being prepared for that longer term vision was something I took away from that, as well as, I mean, we're starting to see it in our business, right? We bought properties. We started like 4-ish years ago, and we're getting to the point now where we're starting to sell properties and starting to see some liquidity events. And it's awesome to see like all that work you did 4 years ago to do that deal. You got a couple $1,000 here and there cash flow, right? But now, you sell that property 4 or 5 years down the road, you make 50, 100, 200 grand on that sale. You take that capital and then you put it into the next deal, and you just continue rolling that, right? That's really the game of real estate, is you just continue buying properties, adding value, exiting them, refinancing them, take that cash, put it in the next one, right? You continue rolling that and do that for 5 years, 10 years, that conveyor belt theory. And it becomes a really meaningful number in the future.
Yeah, Bill is. I've known Bill for a while now. He's, his I think his company, or his not his book, but Real Estate Raw is like his kind of the media arm that he has, and he's definitely very raw. The way that he goes about coaching and explaining the real estate business, particularly the commercial real estate syndication business, because there's so many different ways in real estate to approach things, but in his analogy, the conveyor belt makes a whole lot of sense, right? You're essentially buying these properties, adding value to them, taking them through the cycle, and then when it's time, and you can opportunistically sell, essentially move that property off the conveyor belt, and then recycle that capital back onto the conveyor belt on the other side. And it's a great way to look at it. He talks about how much money does everybody want to create in real estate, and for whatever reason everybody seems to pick $10,000 a month, and in like cash flow or income that you can spend. And so he breaks down that essentially if you have $1.5 million worth of equity in income producing assets that are sort of on your conveyor belt, and you take a 8% cash on cash return from that 1.5 million of equity, you'll be making $120,000 a year on your conveyor belt. And then as you recycle that capital through, you'll be able to find ways to add more properties to the conveyor belt, and add more equity, which will increase your monthly and annual income from your real estate properties. So I thought that was it's a great example. Bill's someone that I look up to and respect in this business for sure, and he's a great guy.
For sure. Next speaker was Karina. So she talked about, she's a tax advisor and accountant, and talked a lot about playing the IRS game, was the word she used. And I think this is certainly can be a dry topic. Taxes are a lot of times just go over my head, and I tend to tune out and just kind of think, well, I got a professional that knows what they're doing and they'll handle it for me, which I think is super key. And she reiterated that, right? Like if you get into business, right, you're building a business, whatever it might be, having a good accountant and a good CPA and a good attorney, right? I think we've learned those are two very key things that are worth that extra couple $100 they might charge to pay for someone a little bit better. So that was one of the takeaways I had from that, as well as, to maximize, like all the deductions that are available in real estate that's why all the ultra wealthy invest in real estate, right? The main reason is the tax benefits. There's really nothing else better out there for tax benefits than real estate. There's so many different loopholes and different things. So it's good to have an idea of what you need to be doing to implement these different tax strategies, but also having the right professional to work with you to make sure that you're implementing them right on your tax returns and you actually get the money back, right? Or get the deduction. And she talked about cost segregation studies too. So we do cost segregation studies on all of our properties. I mean, it's wild to see at the end of the year when you had money come into your bank account and then you look at the tax return at the end of the year and it says, oh, we lost $200,000 in the property. It's really an awesome thing. And I know there's some legislator out there that's potentially trying to block some of the benefits, but we'll see. Hopefully it sticks around because it's an awesome part of real estate investing.
Yeah, Anna, she brought the energy. I kept making comments about it, but at whatever time it was, 3 p.m. after people have been sitting there all day, throwing someone up there to talk about accounting and taxes is I don't know if that was an oversight on our part, but she certainly did very well. There were so many people taking a ton of notes, and it's a crucial part of anyone's wealth building strategy, right? The goal is to try to you know add and grow your balance sheet and assets, and then minimize your taxable liability. And she walked through a bunch of strategies how to do that in a very energetic and informative way that I thought people really grasped onto. I thought she was great.
I agree. Next, we had a financing panel. So we had three people on that panel. One was Ricky Schneider with Crux. We work with him on a lot of our deals. He's a mortgage broker. And then Matt Sell was another mortgage broker on there. And then we had Ed Schaefer, who is actually the CEO of First Federal Bank. So it was really good to get different insights on. I'm glad we had one banker and broker, and kind of saw the different dynamic between using a broker and going directly to the bank. We asked a lot of questions surrounding that. And I think Ed was great. I mean, that guy's been doing it for a long time and running a bank, and we got to get him on stage and talk to the audience. So that was awesome. But the overarching theme, right, as we all know right now, is getting financing is tough, right? It's not 2 years ago, 3 years ago. Like, I remember on our deals, like, I'd put together the financing package for a deal. I'd send it out to 6 of our banks, and like they'd be calling me 10 minutes later, like pretty much fighting over who's going to get the deal, right? Like one person's at 3.25% interest rate, the other one's at 3.1. It's like I put them against each other, and then I get a call on the golf course, and he's like, "I got you at 3%." Deal. I mean, that's what it was, right? Is these banks were literally fighting over to give you business. Where in today's situation, right, as we're recording this and we're right in the market, it is much tougher. Like you're really having to sell yourself to banks. I mean, deals are still getting done, but banks are very skeptical. I mean, I think it's every other week now I'm getting a call from a banker buddy that says, "Hey, we're pretty much done lending for the year on commercial real estate." Just got one the other day where we're done lending on commercial real estate for the rest of the year. We'll do some select lending with very like existing clients that we've done a ton of business with. We're not taking on any new clients. We're kind of shutting down that arm of the business for the rest of the year, which is interesting, right? Because if you'd have asked someone that 2 years ago, they probably would have said, "No way, we would be shutting down." So that was really the biggest takeaway I had was it's tough to get financing right now. Deals are still getting done, but you really have to put a lot of emphasis on making sure going into a deal that you're confident on getting financing. They have the right strategy in place, that it's going to pass all their requirements, because you don't want to get deep into a deal and find out, well, there's no financing available. So some of the other things they talked about was like things that are getting deal done right now are having a rock solid guarantor team and track record, right? So the people that are going and signing on the debt that are ultimately the bank is looking at to guarantee these note, you want that team to be solid, right? So experience, liquidity, net worth, all these things are very important. And if you build a really solid team, that's going to help you get a deal done. And another thing was, working with banks you already have relationships with. So if you've already worked with the bank on a deal, start with that bank on your next deal, right? I think right now it certainly is important to go out and continue building banking relationships. And they talked about how important that was. But if you can go to a bank you already have a relationship with, your odds of getting a deal done are much better, because they already know you, they've already done business with you. And if you've proven yourself over the past few years on a deal, they're more inclined to do another deal with you right now. And lastly was deposits. So this is something interesting that we're starting to hear more of as well, is banks are really incentivized right now to get deposits, to get cash into their bank. So one thing you're seeing a lot of is banks will, if they say, "Yeah, we'll give you a loan on a deal, here's the terms," and you agree to that, a contingency in there might be you need to hold X amount of dollars in our bank accounts to get the deal done, because they want to see, bank people are starting to pull out of banks, a lot, especially smaller banks, moving to, more Chases and, the bigger banks, because of what we've seen, right? With all the banking crises that are going on, right? Everyone's pulling their money out and they're scared they're going to lose it. So that's one thing as well to keep an eye out, and potentially a selling point when you're talking to banks is, hey, I'll move my personal accounts over to this bank or whatever there might be, right? If you can hold more cash at that bank, that's a big selling point for banks right now.
100%, very timely. With interest rates doubling, in the last couple of years or more, right? Like it's on everybody's mind. I think it was apparent that it's in order to get financing for deals, working with brokers such as Ricky and Matt, like, can really really help your odds of finding the right debt for the deals. Like we always talk about, buying the deal at the right price, having a value add strategy for managing the asset, and then financing the deal correctly. Those are kind of like the three-legged stool of doing a successful real estate deal. And so with financing as challenging as it is right now, banks not looking to lend, and how different it was from 2 years ago, it just makes it that much more obvious that working with an established broker like Ricky or Matt can really help your odds for finding the right debt for your deals. And then some of the other strategies, like you said, it's a relationship game. Knowing your banks, having them know you intimately and know your balance sheet, and feel comfortable working with you and your track record goes such a long way. And so that was really informative.
Agreed. The next one was this was day 2, so that wrapped up day 1. Then we actually after that this is a quick segment before we get into the next speaker, was we did a VIP component. So we went out and did a cocktail hour, rented out the top floor 35 of the building, living downtown, and did that. It was really cool. I think we had like 40 or so people come to that. And then after that, we took everyone out to a steak dinner at Moe's Steakhouse downtown, which was really cool. We had our own private room and a really good dinner, and the networking was awesome, right? I think I learned VIPs where a lot of the value is had, right? Generally in these networking events you go to, if you can afford to go the extra level and get in these after parties, the after rooms, right? That's where a lot of the quality networking happens, because you get more intimate one-on-one conversations. A lot of times during these day-to-day events, there's a jam-packed day of schedule. You'll get some time to network in between speakers, and while you're going to the bathroom or something, right, you run into someone. But I think when you go to when there's usually a VIP component of going out to a dinner or doing some sort of activity, that's your time to really specifically network. It's time set aside to network and not necessarily speaking sessions. So we did that, went out, had a fun time, and then came back for day 2 on Saturday. And the first speaker was Tonny Romero. So he was our first guest on the podcast. So if you haven't listened to that episode, go check it out. He's a local Milwaukee guy, younger guy that really got his start in wholesaling in real estate, but is now involved in a lot of different businesses. And his presentation was around social media and building a brand online, the importance of doing that. So I had a few good takeaways from there. First he talked about like grinding while you're young, right? When you have time. As you get older, right, more responsibility starts stacking on. It becomes much harder to put in the hours to build a business. So the sooner you can start, the better. And really emphasize that personal brand is the best marketing tool you can have, right? Building a personal brand, we see it time and time again, right, is one of the most valuable things you can have in business. Because if you have a personal brand, it just makes everything else so much easier, right? When you want to launch a new business, when you need to raise money, whatever you need to do, when you need to find a new deal, if you have a personal brand, you can leverage that to ultimately increase the output of it. So that was one. He talked some like strategies around posting content. So he said, be cognizant of the content you're posting and what kind of clients you're trying to attract, right? You want to make your profile, whether it's Instagram, we talked about Instagram, very attractive, right? So when someone clicks on it, they're going to quickly make a decision whether they want to follow you or not. So if you have a bunch of scattered content that's all over the place and not really attractive, someone's going to quickly make a decision not to follow you, right? So if you can create more of an attractive grid on your profile, the likelihood of someone following you increases. Talked about posting too, being consistent. Of course, you hear that. I think that's a pretty basic one, but if you're going to start posting, be consistent with it. You don't want to post once and then think you're done and kind of wipe your hands clean for another month and say, I'll post again next month. It's a consistent act, which I've learned, right, is it's time consuming. Posting content and oftentimes it takes years to see a reward from it, but it's something that when you decide you want to do it, you got to stay consistent with it. So figure out a schedule of how you're going to post, what your strategy is, and just stay consistent. Another thing he talked about was focusing on videos over pictures, which I thought was interesting because he specifically called out that with a video, especially with like reels on Instagram right now, it can get much more eyeballs than a picture. A picture is only going to go to your existing followers, where a reel can get spit out to the algorithm, and all of a sudden someone from the other side of the country seeing your video that never knew who you were, and now they follow you, right? So posting videos provides more opportunity to put higher quality content out and ultimately convey more of a message. He also mentioned one of his quotes was, don't post like a fan, post like a friend. I thought that was interesting. His thing is he does connects with a lot of celebrities and influencers and NBA players and those sort of things, and very much has used that as a strategy to grow his online presence. Because if you see, if I click on someone's profile and I see they're hanging out with, I don't know, they're hanging out with Aaron Rodgers, right? Or they're hanging out with a celebrity or something. Like you're gonna be like, oh shit, this guy's cool. I'm gonna follow him, right? I know, like if you clicked on someone's profile, Jeff, and saw they're hanging out with Aaron Rodgers and the guy looked like a dweeb, but he had that picture, you're gonna follow him?
Probably would. I've always said Aaron and I would get along well. We should hang out.
So if you've been listening to the podcast, you've probably heard us talk about this syndication model. We've talked about it a lot, and it's what we do at our business with Smart Asset Capital and has allowed us to grow into where we are today. My story, I got started in real estate about 5 years ago, started with a duplex and was struggling to find where to go next. How was I going to scale quicker? How was I going to get out of my job and build a business? Long story short, I landed on syndication. And 1 year after buying that duplex, I syndicated an 89-unit apartment building. Fast forward 10 syndication deals later, I decided to launch a one-on-one mentor program where I work directly with people that already have experience in real estate and want to get into syndication. So if you want to learn more about how you can work with me directly to get into your first syndication deal, go to www.cresyndicator.io, click on the Learn More link, and that'll have you fill out a form to book a call directly with me. Thanks.
I like his book club.
So that was interesting. But yeah, and lastly, you talked about focus on educating, not pitching, right? I think a lot of times you click on someone's profile and it's just all pitches, like selling their courses or whatever they're selling. And it's just a constant stream of them selling stuff. Of course, you want to be pitching, and that's the point of building a personal brand, is you want to gain business out of it. But majority of your content shouldn't be pitching, right? It should be putting out educational stuff, and maybe 1 out of 10 pieces of content have a pitch in there to convert someone into a customer, right? So those were some of the big takeaways I had from his presentation.
Yeah, Tony's incredible. He's super, he's very young in business. I think he's 24 or something, but he's had a lot of success. He works very hard. He's got a lot of different business ventures that he's in. Aside from real estate, I think he's got food trucks and a dog grooming salon that they have a shit ton of followers on their Instagram. He said something about posting, on certain days of the week and at certain times, where, and focusing on quality versus quantity. Like, yes, you have to be consistent in posting on social media, and his particular social media that he's best known for, or sort of his platform of choice is Instagram. But I think it applies across the board, right? Like quality versus quantity, but yet still enough quantity or enough consistency in posting that you're able to get eyeballs. And I think it's just building your personal brand in general and building your Rolodex of contacts and people that know you and trust you and like you and want to do business with you. It helps so much. And then you throw social media in the mix and you're able to really scale that. The thing is, back before social media, it was just how many people you met at networking events and through doing various business deals throughout, your career, and you build that Rolodex that way. Well, if you're if you're active on social media, you're posting quality content that's educational, and not trying to pitch people. You can build your Rolodex of people that want to do business with you so much quicker because of the scale and the amount of eyeballs that you can get onto your profile and people interacting with you. So Tony was incredible. Think the world of him too, and really looking forward to watching him continue to grow his business going forward.
Yeah, I think one other thing I thought of too that he touched on, but also jogged my memory. I was watching some Hermosi last night, and he was talking about other forms of content, like a YouTuber podcast, right? That sort of content lives on forever, right? I think oftentimes with like Instagram or something, you might post a picture, post a reel, and it's going to be alive for a couple days, right? Then it kind of falls out of the algorithm and it falls down your profile grid and kind of disappears, right? Whereas with YouTube or like this podcast we're doing, someone might be watching this episode a year from now, right? And it could still be relevant. It's ever evolving content, evergreen content. So that I think there's multiple strategies when it comes to posting. And of course, we're learning a lot, right? We're by no means any expert in it, but it's interesting to look at different content strategy and the benefits of each one. Absolutely.
Totally agree.
And then next we kicked off a broker panel. So we had Nick Keys and Santiago on a broker panel, and they talked about, and our partner, Adam McCarthy, another one of our guests on the podcast, did the interview for that one. And we just talked about, it was kind of a two-angle the questions surrounded two things, right? First being, how do you build a relationship with brokers, get good deals? And second being, if you are a broker agent, how do you grow in that business? So it's cool to hear the different angles of, because obviously Adam's involved on both sides. He's a successful broker, successful investor that finds deals from other brokers as well. So the first big point was spending time building deep relationships with brokers. And this is something that I definitely have seen in our business, right? Where it's, you can't, so many people, and I see it all the time at the mentor program I do as well, right? Like people expect like, I'm just going to send an email to this broker. I'm just gonna give him a quick call and say, hey, I'm looking for 20 unit apartment buildings in Milwaukee. Like, let me know when you find one. And they kind of send that email or hang up the phone and say, all right, my job's done, right? Let me just sit back and wait for them to email me. They're going to send me the deals. That's not how it works, right? Brokers get 50 of those calls a month, and they might throw you on their email list, and great, you're going to see that deal, and so are 500 other people on that list. But the good deals are found by building deep relationships. So continue, and of course you can't do this with 50 different brokers, right? Like you usually kind of pick, okay, these 5 to 10 brokers, I'm really going to focus on building a relationship with them. Spend the time going out, get lunch with them, right? Spend the time following up with them, checking in with them, asking them how their vacation was when they talked about they were going to go on vacation next week, go golfing with them, right? Like build that deep relationship, because then when they get a deal that crosses their desk and it's a 20 unit apartment building, they're going to call you first and say, hey, I know you said you're looking for a deal like this. I wanted to float it by you first before I send it out to everyone else. That's how good deals get done 99% of the time. They don't really get done when you get hit with an email blast. What I've seen, right? Like how many deals have we bought off an email blast? Not many, maybe not any. That was a huge point for me. And then, then they talked a lot about like, if you're an agent or a broker and you're trying to grow in this business as an agent or a broker, the biggest strategy they're talking about is cold calling, right? I think a lot of times, and again, we're not super experienced on the broker side, and we do have our license and I've done a few deals there, but it's not something we're super involved with day to day. But Nick talked a lot about like how many cold calls. I think he said he does like 100 cold calls a day, like some used to at least, or he's still doing them. But it's that's what it is, right? I think it's really a grind to find deals as a broker. It's not easy to find deals, just like it's not easy to find deals as an investor. The brokers are grinding twice as hard to find good deals, and that's why you want to leverage those relationships. So when they have a good deal, they bring it to you, and that's how they earn their commission, right? I think a lot of times, I know, thinking of one person specifically that always bitches about the broker commission, right? Like this broker's getting paid, 4%. That's $200,000. Like what the hell do they do? It's like, well, yeah, some deals do just fall in their laps, right? And like, they get a deal and great, but you don't know. I mean, they probably started those conversations 6 years ago. Nick talked about that. Like I was calling on this person for 6 years straight. And now, he called me a couple months ago and said, I got the deal for you, right? Like it's time to go. So I think sometimes we don't see that end of it, right? Like all the work that goes into actually getting that listing. And of course, yeah, they get the listing and it might be a smooth process and they don't really do shit for those 3 months and the deal gets closed, but it's a grind finding deals as a broker.
100%. And I think, what's interesting here is that it's just, and that's the whole point of this Winning Wealth, show that we're talking about is, how to build wealth, health, happiness, and like the traits to be successful, like they permeate through your whole life, and they translate from, various different businesses. Like whether you're out trying to buy real estate, whether you're out trying to be a broker and list real estate, whether you're a broker, mortgage broker, and you're putting together the debt packages on deals, whether you're running your own business in a completely different different industry. It's funny that they all seem to kind of follow the same traits. And so when you're starting out as a broker, as Nick said, you got to work really, really, really hard. You got to put in the hours, blocking and tackling, making the phone calls, networking, and doing whatever you can to find ways to build relationships, build credibility for yourself as an expert in that space, and then you can reap the benefits of that, years down the road. And then on the other side of that too, I totally agree. I mean, brokers, when things are really, really easy, and business is all good, the economy's great, things are humming along, you might question sometimes like, well, why are we paying that commission? And that's for real estate broker, it's for a mortgage broker, it's for sales guys throughout whatever industry, right? Like that it's easy for that to creep into your mind, when things are really easy. But you got to remember that, these people, if they're really good at what they do, they've spent years building those relationships and building their own business and getting themselves in a position to be able to earn those commissions. And when things aren't as easy and you can't find a deal or you can't find financing, right? Those are the people that you call, and they're the ones that have been, spending, years of their life and spending, hours each day, perfecting their craft and growing their business and finding the deals and building those relationships. So that was a great session as well.
Mm-hmm. And then to wrap out the event, we had Andy Sallee speak. He is this guy's another beast. I mean, I think was really I was excited to hear him speak. I got to meet him. I talked about when I announced him coming on stage. I met him when I was down in Miami this past winter. Spent a few days hanging out, and the guy's a beast. I mean, he built $125 million real estate portfolio on his own. No partners, just straight up was buying properties on his own, refinancing them, and building a portfolio. And now it's just kind of looking at the syndication model as another way to grow. But so that was the first kind of thing he talked about is, that really the premise, a lot of times the event, not the premise, but we talked a lot about syndication throughout the event, right? And he kind of took the opposite approach, said, hey, like, you don't need to syndicate deals. You can go out and build a huge portfolio on your own. This is how I did it. And he's got a really good story. I'm not going to go through his whole story. We'll be posting the full YouTube videos for each speaker so you can watch his speaking session when that gets posted. But he has really a story of going through a lot of making mistakes, right, and building from that and kind of falling in a dark hole for a while and coming back out of it even more motivated. But it was, he really talked about it's easy to get comfortable and hit a certain level, right? I think he talked about he was making, built a $50 million portfolio. He's making $100,000 a month and went down to Miami and lived at the Fontainebleau for 2 months and just partied every day, right? And had fun, right? And it's easy to fall into that trap because all of his friends were saying, that's what you should be doing, right? Like, you made it. You got enough money. You can go live comfortably and sit on the beach and party. And, he found like that got old after 2 months, right? And to all, everyone that's going into a 9 to 5 every day or grinding right now, that might sound like, yeah, that is the ultimate goal. That's when you've made it. But I think if you can think through that, right? And I can't say like I've gotten to a level where I could go do that, but I think you could certainly see how that would get old, right? It might be fun for a couple of weeks, but when you're growing a business, you want to continue to grow, right? You don't want to just hit a flag point and be like, all right, I'm done. So that was a big one. Always pushing yourself to the next level, stay motivated. That was a really overarching theme of what he's talking about. And then he specifically talked about doing deals and some mistakes he made regarding due diligence and getting comfortable thinking like you're the best investor out there, right? You kill it on 3 deals and like you just think it's so easy and all you need to do is just buy this deal and magic's going to work itself. But he talked about making a mistake after you already had built experience and kind of let off the gas a little bit and didn't necessarily do all the steps on a deal, specifically in due diligence. And that led to, I can't remember the exact dollar amount, but it was a lot of money he lost because of missing a certain step in due diligence. So that's certainly, I mean, we've talked about in some of our podcasts, we've made that mistake on deals, right? There's, going through due diligence is very important. Check all the boxes, even though you might think, oh, that's fine, it'll be okay. Go through and still go through that step and double check that it's still good. And then one other one was he talked about setting up a team of very smart people and pay them more than you think they should be getting paid to handle big things in your business. So he talked about he has a CFO that handles like all of the deal coordination process, gets financing, does all that, which is a very important part of the process. And he says, I pay him double probably what he should be getting paid. And I think he only works like 20 hours a week, right? But he talked about how much more money that's made him by having that person in place. So I think it's certainly when you get to a stage when you're looking at hiring people, I think that's kind of where we're getting close to that stage in our business where it's like, all right, potentially we could look at hiring someone. It's an interesting thought process to go through of, let's pay a premium on hiring someone and get someone slightly better because they're going to add that much more value in the business. And then lastly, the note I had here was he does triple net properties. So he does a lot of retail centers. And and this is something, I mean, we're really doubling down on the triple net space in our business as well. But he just highlighted a lot of the big differences of why he loves triple net properties. And ultimately being, it's way less management intensive than apartments. You find the right tenant, you get the right tenant in place. They sign a 5-10 year long lease. They handle all the maintenance. They do everything. They pay their rent on time. It's really a much less management intensive business to build a portfolio on triple net. He talks about how lean of a team he has with owning, I think he's like $150 million worth of property now, and mostly all of it being triple net. And he's got a very lean team, and they can manage those properties well just by having a couple people on the team. Those are some of the big takeaways. Again, I think that's definitely when those get published, I recommend going through and listening to all of these. But I think if two that really stood out to me were Scott Lurie's and Andy Sallee's as being two of my favorites.
Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt Andy Sallee brought the energy, and having him kind of wrap up at the end of the event was perfect. I mean, you either have him kick off or wrap up, but Scott did a great job kicking it off, and then Andy, I mean, it almost felt like, I know that he talked a lot about Tony Robbins and the connections that he has with some of the folks that, very well known names that we all know, just because he's been putting himself in these rooms time and time again over the last few decades. And you almost felt like Tony Robbins was up on stage, speaking to everybody, talking about being, getting comfortable, being uncomfortable. And I think, he had a lot of great lessons. He's someone that I'm definitely going to spend more time following and looking into, his background. I hope to be able to hang out with him again. He's a great guy, a lot of great lessons. He talked about, and he talks about the good and the bad. I mean, there's no doubt, like, when everybody has different stuff going on in their personal lives to fight through. He talked about paying to be, kind of mentored by Grant Cardone or whatever. And Grant asked him, okay, what would be the only things that, the things that would hold you back from achieving your goals in life? And he sat and thought about it, probably after, he was probably down in Miami at the Fontainebleau, and thought about, well, it's booze and casual sex. And so he put a stop to that, and he doesn't drink anymore. He's got a committed long-term relationship. We met his girlfriend there, and she was great too. And so, he's consistently done the things needed to do to build a long-lasting, super, successful business by any measure, really. And, one thing that struck me about Andy too was he was very approachable. He didn't have a huge ego, even though he's got, a ton of assets. But the other thing is, and I took a note of this just in my mind when I was watching, people in the crowd. Andy was taking a shit ton of notes, So here's this guy, that's got arguably, I don't know, if he has more assets than anybody else in the room. Obviously Scott's got a ton too, and Justin. There was a lot of big hitters in the room with big real estate portfolios and different businesses and companies, but Andy was diligently taking notes, and I thought that was incredible to see, that no matter where you are and how successful you might be or think you are, right, like to always be learning, always be trying to push yourself to get better. He talked about, again, like I said, paying to be in rooms with people like Tony Robbins and Grant Cardone and the relationships that he built from that, and paying to be in networking conferences like the one that we had going on, right? Like that's taking the first step, right? And then taking the next step is figuring out, okay, how can I get in the VIP room like you were talking about, and basically be able to, get deeper relationships and conversations going than I'm going to get by sitting in a room listening to people talk on stage all day. But even when people are sitting there talking on stage, how can I get better? Well, I can take a bunch of notes. And maybe there's one thing that I pick up from each speaker that I could take away and better myself and better my business. And so it's so important, and it was great to see someone like that being so attentive, following along. And then when it was his time to get up there, he got up, and I'm someone that usually has a lot of energy, right? I mean, that guy brought the heat. He brought the pain. He brought the energy. It was awesome, and he's a great guy. I look forward to building a relationship with him over time and following his story and seeing where he takes it next.
I totally agree. Yeah, I was very grateful would be the word that he stuck around for the whole event, right? Like he was there talking to everyone, willing to have conversations with everyone. How often do you get to see that, right? With these big speakers. I mean, this guy's spoke on some very big stages, right? And like most people probably would have to pay to get him to come speak on the stage. We didn't pay any of our speakers. This was all relationships we've already had, and they did it because they value the relationship. So I think that was really awesome to see. I agree with that point. And that kind of goes into, we can kind of wrap the pod with talking about our takeaways and learning lessons from the event, right? Aside from the individual speakers and learning what we did from the speakers, what did, Jeff and I personally get out of throwing this event, right? Some of the learning lessons we had, some of the benefits, some of the takeaways. So, the first one right off the bat, right, is throwing a paid event is much harder than a free event. Getting people to buy tickets. I mean, we had low cost tickets too. I mean, they were much cheaper than you would see at most events, and it's still tough, right? Even to get someone to show up to a free event's tough, but imagine now I'm asking someone for a couple $100 to come. It's tough, right? So I think that was really a grind. We probably started selling tickets 2.5 months ahead of advance. So that was one of the first ones, is just knowing if you're going to decide to do a paid event, like, be ready for the amount of work it's going to take to get people to show up, because the pressure's on, right? You booked the venue 3 months in advance, you stroke that, whatever it was, $10,000 check, and it's game on, right? Like, you got to get people to show up to cover your costs, first off, but second off, the worst thing you want is you get all these speakers to show up on stage and there's 10 people in the audience. Imagine how much that would suck. So it was a grind. Ultimately, I was really pleased with how many people showed up, how many tickets we sold, but that was one big one. I think starting to sell tickets as far in advance as possible, right? Like, start early bird specials, all those sort of things. I mean, you see it more and more where people are throwing events. They're selling, like, the 10X growth conferences. I mean, they're selling those things like 10 months in advance, right? So the earlier the better, I think, if you're looking to throw one of these events. And then, we saw an influx. People buy tickets the last couple days, even like the morning of, when I was walking into the event space to kick off the event, my phone was dinging, like 8 people bought tickets as I was walking from my apartment 4 blocks away to the venue, right? So I think people wait to the last minute, which we all do that, right? So I think you just kind of expect that as well. We talked about this a few times, but the VIP component, I kind of just saw it firsthand again. I mean, we only charged a couple $100 extra. We probably should have charged more for buying someone a steak dinner, and we did this whole huge VIP component. So whenever, like, I personally go and look at events, of course you got to look at the additional benefit of it, and sometimes maybe there's not that big of a benefit to go VIP, but if there's a benefit to doing it and you get some exclusive benefit, you're going to be in this room, or you're going to go to this party or have this dinner, do it if you can, because I think the value is always there. And a lot of the value in these events is in that room after the fact, sitting down with dinner with someone, or sitting one-on-one with someone and having that conversation with them. Then I would say personally, some of the lessons I learned was just wanting to get better at speaking on stage, right? I think I've spoken in front of some crowds. That was the biggest crowd I've spoken in front of on a stage. And seeing, I mean, some of these speakers we had, they were really good, right? Like, really good stage presence, really good at keeping the energy high, speaking clearly, right? So it's something that I took as a takeaway, and actually I'm working on things now to implement some things to get better on it. But, I think that's certainly a skill, especially if you're looking to grow in the personal brand arena, those sort of things, like having good stage presence and speaking on stages, then you get invited to speak on other stages. That was a big takeaway for me.
Yeah, no, and I mean, and for me as well, I think, I'm naturally relatively comfortable speaking in front of people. It's not something that really gets me nervous, I would say, but just that was one of the big reasons I wanted to do this too, is because selfishly, like, there was a lot of other benefits, for everybody, and networking was great, but selfishly, to be able to get better at stage presence and being able to keep the energy up while you're there and keep people engaged and get people fired up, right? Like, that's truly something that you can take in your career and in your life, and be able to open a lot of doors by being able to captivate an audience, right? And get people kind of fired up, hanging on every word that you're saying, and get people amped for what's coming next, right? I think that was a great experience. I'm looking forward to doing a lot more of that. That was one of the goals I had for this year, is get better at public speaking, or speaking in front of groups, in front of crowds, because you're going to have to do a lot of that in whatever business that you're in, right? Like, the better that you are at communicating, the farther that you can go. And I think that's something that, gets overlooked, and it gets overlooked a lot of times by people, because people don't want to put themselves in an uncomfortable position. It can be, they call it stage fright for a reason, right? Like, it can be scary, it can be nerve wracking. And so the better you can be at that, I think, is important for anyone's success in their careers, unless you're just straight up a back office, accounting person, and that's fine. But if you're looking to really go out and grow a business, being great at public speaking is that's a huge trait. So I would say too, just overall event management. And we didn't really have a budget. We didn't really know what we were doing, right? We've hosted events in the past, as you said before. We had an event back in the day called Wisconsin Apartment Investors, where it was just held once a month on like a Thursday night or whatever, and we'd do pizza and beers, right? And you don't really have to do much event management for that. You get up and say, hey, thanks everyone for coming. There's the pizza, there's the beers. Grab something, and today we're gonna have someone stand up and talk about whatever, right? And that was about it, and then we did a little bit of a bigger event where it was a panel last year, and then we had to prep and plan for that a bit more, but this was much bigger than that. And understanding the transitions between speakers and thinking through that stuff. And this is stuff that you can't really prep for unless you do it, right? So the more times you get into stuff like this, the more things that you'll see and remember for, hey, next time, remember when I'm, you gotta figure out like when breaks are going to be, like when is the best time to take a break, because you don't want people to get up and stand and go talk, and then they, it's like herding cats, getting them to come back, and it delays everything by 20 or 30 minutes, right? Like, so you got to be able to strategically plan breaks for networking. You've got to be able to strategically find ways to keep the energy up and people amped and excited about the next speaker, and just that whole event management and sequence and the flow of things, as well as just getting better at public speaking and captivating audiences was great learning lessons for me, and I'm fired up about it. I'm excited to do another one.
Yeah, I think a lot of the small logistical things we're just free flowing it. Like the music was,
yeah, Brock kept doing
cutting out
on his phone, and it's like we're asking people, hey, what do you want? What do you want? We weren't even asking some people. We were just playing whatever song that Brock thought was going to be cool at the time, and
a lot of Rick Ross.
Yeah, you were hitting some bangers, so that was cool. But and then just like, when do you start the music? When do you stop it? And just coordinating a lot of that. It takes a lot of work, and that's why in bigger conferences there's a full blown marketing, communications, events team that manages that. That's why they have with weddings they have like event. I don't even, they have
coordinator. Yeah.
I should know, but
it's a production.
It's a production, exactly. But I think that's a wrap. But we
well, one thing I wanted to quickly highlight, just to give everyone, those that are sticking around at the end here, and give a little insight. I mean, so overall, we on the event, we went into this not necessarily, we were trying to break even going to this event, right? And Jeff mentioned there was some cost. We didn't keep a tight budget. Probably sold tickets for less than we should. We lost about $20,000 in this event, and I think we're certainly seeing the other side of it now, where there's benefits of the relationships we built, and that's going to turn into closing businesses. We did a few pitches. We didn't do many pitches, but closing some of that, which I think will regain all of it. But that was one. People come into this event not necessarily looking to make money. I hope you got some value out of that episode. We really enjoyed hosting this event. I personally learned a ton from each of the speakers, and I hope some of those quick notes that we portrayed on each speaker provided some value, as well as we'll be releasing over time here each individual speaking session. So be sure to tune in if you found any speaker specifically that you wanted to watch their full presentation. Again, I learned a lot being the host of this event. Really saw the whole gamut of what it takes to throw a paid event. So we were really excited to have gone through this process and now be able to take this to hopefully be doing another one here soon. Thanks.